Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
I welcome you to the fifth program in a rather long series that is titled Confronting Hate, Humanity's Greatest Challenge. On each of those programs, we are inviting people that have been at our campus and also at Gonzaga University addressing this at a conference, and we're very grateful to all the co-sponsors we have, which will be on the credits at the end of the program. Today, we're so privileged to have 4 students with us to speak to the topic, Silence is Consent, Tools to Speak for Change in Social Climate. First of all, I welcome to the program Mike Raines, who is from Gonzaga University, and Mike has been with us for the last year preparing for this conference. And Mike, thank you for all the efforts you've put in it, and you're really responsible for our guest here on the panel that was at our college today. And next to him is Victoria Ricard, who is also a Gonzaga University student, and we're equally happy to have you on the program. And our other 2 guests are from Western Washington University. They came all the way over from the West Coast to be with us, and we're so delighted. And for our first guest from there is Jonathan Berry, as I've indicated, at Western Washington University. And our other guest is Tiffany Fergerger, get that right, I hope, and she's also at Western Washington University. Welcome to all 4 of you. You're very special, and you've been on a panel here today with 10 students, so we'll get right into the program. Mike, I will start with you since that you've been a coordinator to help us with all this process. I'm going to ask you the question I'll ask all 4. Tell us a little bit more about, one, your status at the university, that is you're a senior, a junior, whatever. In your case, you have a position at Gonzaga. And my second part of my question is, what got you involved in this very special program? I know from what Mike sent me that you are very much working and recognizing that cultural change is profound and enduring, and you students have been focusing on tools that are the best to deal with our everyday situations where hate has found its rearing of its head in our society, and do you speak up when you see that? So with that, Mike, we'll start with you.
Yes. Well, I am a staff member at Gonzaga, the outreach coordinator, and essentially we put this panel together knowing that that one of the most difficult things we see with students at Gonzaga in particular is that there seems to be a rather large population of students that when you ask them, maybe personally or maybe not even personally, but in a safe setting, what it is that seems to bother them about these sorts of things, it's that nobody seems to say anything. And even if most students seem to be, I think, really offended by perhaps racist comments or jokes or things of this nature, it's sometimes the most difficult thing is that there isn't anyone speaking up. And so we've decided that I think collectively we wanted to come together and say, perhaps what is the most profound thing is that if we can just get students to recognize that the other students sitting around them are more than likely thinking the same thing, that could be a really profound cultural change. So,
creating responses and actions. Next is Victoria.
Yes. Well, I'm a junior at Gonzaga University, and I got involved in this kind of in an indirect way. I was a coordinator of Take Back the Night, which is a program to combat sexual assault and sexual violence, and that led me to become more aware of the student population, become friends with people who have been assaulted or maybe gay or lesbian people at Gonzaga, and so it made me become more aware of the climate and how they're discriminated against and the lack of diversity at Gonzaga. And so it really made me want to work harder to change and to raise awareness about all issues of isms and just help change the climate of Gonzaga. So.
I hear in your comments something that's so important in the field of civil rights, human rights, is being an ally for those who have been excluded or they feel at times alone. Tiffany, we'll come to you next. And again, welcome from the West Coast. We're so delighted to have you here and give us your status and also your involvement.
Well, I go to Western Washington University, and it's my second year there. And this is the first year that I really got involved actively with working to combat racism, sexism, all the other isms out there. I mainly got involved because I knew that there was a problem, but I just didn't know what to do. And I knew that this group was the perfect place to go and the perfect place where I could find people to give me the resources and help me along my way. And so that I could use that back in my personal life with my friends and family.
So well said. You're empowering yourself to be active rather than on the sidelines.
Mm-hmm.
And our other guest, as I've already introduced, is Jonathan. And again, your status and your involvement.
Well, I'm a student at Western. I'm a senior, and I'm a political science major.
That is the best of majors.
Thank you.
That was mine too.
Yes. Am I home with all of these political scientists?
All right, great.
But Tiffany, there are other majors that are fine too.
I'm the student coordinator of a group on campus called Will Act for Change, which is a peer health educating improv theater group. And what we do is we explore issues around violence, sexual health, alcohol and drugs, and ally building. And the way we do that is it's an interactive program with students who have the ability to come on and change our scenes as we go. And we show different scenarios and different ways of dealing with different situations. I've also worked in different capacities through Prevention and Wellness Services, which is the organization that Tiffany and I work for at Western, in Western Men Against Violence, which is a men's violence prevention program, also as an HIV tester. So I've been doing this work for a while.
All four of you have something very much in common, social justice. And you want everyone to be treated with dignity. And I'm so impressed with you, and it gives us great hope for the future. I'm going to start here this time and go back in the other direction, so not the same people answer last or first. Let's talk about some specific issues and what you see out there. Jonathan, I'll start with you this time. Of all the areas of discrimination and prejudice, and our whole conference is talking about evolving out of what hate is, and our great speakers have talked about from fear and anger and all comes the hate, which leads to very oftentimes dangerous behavior and prejudice and bigotry. Now that you've been out there and studied, and you have all of these peers, and all of them are important, and all of them need to be addressed. But what do you think are the greatest challenges of all the groups? Which ones are probably have the fewest allies, or government has not addressed as much as they have other issues?
First of all, I need to preface answering your question by saying that I strongly believe that all of the isms, all the sociomas, as we call them, are interconnected. Sure. And you can't study one in a vacuum because they're all connected together. So I'm going to put that out there to start off with. On our campus community, we don't have a huge amount of ethnic and cultural diversity. We're a pretty white bread campus. On the outlooks, at the same time, I believe that we're a very diverse campus. I think some of the biggest places that we see issues come in areas of homophobia and heterosexism, as well as sexism, and into the sexism leading into violence against women. Right. So that's one of our big focuses is heterosexism, homophobia. But then, like I said, we can't deal with any of them on their own. So we definitely try and focus on everything. While that's hard to do because it's a huge challenge, we try and look at it as a whole problem and not little individual problems. So
that's very wise. Tiffany, making my comments is a little more clear. I certainly think that Jonathan has been very, very correct. But our government's real interesting in our constitutional process. As we've tried to evolve through court decisions and laws, we have addressed some groups faster than others. In fact, one of my concerns has been the government through the court has talked about suspect class and semi-suspect and class, meaning that if you're in suspect class, you have to have less evidence to win in court than if you're in one of the other categories. That's what I was trying to get at. Based on that, and you may want to confine your comments to your campus, but and I'm in agreement with Jonathan that these are all important. But I guess I'll put it this way: of all the people you work with, where do the majority of your cases come from, or where do you find people more willing to come forward if they've been involved in victimization?
Well, because I specifically work with the Ally Building Network, we deal a lot with the racism, sexism issues. I personally see a lot more of people coming to us and saying, well, this is what we've experienced on our campus when it comes to race issues. But like Jonathan said, there are so many out there, and I've heard a lot of different stories coming from different isms. So
it's just there is this tie together.
Yeah, very much so.
Or one individual could be a victim because of several communities they belong to. It might be a woman who is a person of color and so forth, and there's different reasons. I had a friend like that. She was a woman, she was African American, and she was lesbian, and she says, Tony, I get it from so many different angles because of my identity in different communities. With that, we'll go back over to Victoria. How would you respond to what Western Washington University in relation to Gonzaga University and this whole question of, do you have, as you work through these issues, do you have more people coming to you from some communities than others with their concerns?
Well, I think it's pretty similar, and I think in a way racism is easier to deal with at Gonzaga, especially within the administration, because we're tied up in issues of sexuality and Catholicism, and if homosexuality should even be talked about or addressed. So racism is more easy to address, like on the surface, right?
You have more clear policies.
Right,
support.
And I think homophobia is more prevalent maybe and less harder to deal with because of the intertwining issues of the religion.
Mike?
I would agree with that. I think that, speaking in broader terms about government and I think policies and rights and things like that, it's certainly clear to me as a political science student that I was at Gonzaga that, it's perfectly legal to discriminate against someone based on their sexual orientation.
Yeah, there's not federal laws anymore.
Right, exactly. Now, that may not be true for places, even in fact at Gonzaga, and that's been something that's really been, I think, difficult, like Victoria said. You're intermingling with issues of Catholic identity and things like that. But I think that also, I'm not a Catholic, but I think that the Catholic Church is very clear about what they think about, particularly when we're talking about issues of hate. It's one thing for the Catholic Church to be intolerant, or I wouldn't even say that, but concerning itself with issues of homosexuality, but they don't tolerate violent things against any group of people. So I think that's coming from a place that is very difficult to understand for a lot of people at Gonzaga.
Yeah, at both your campuses you have great commitment, and as we do here, to nonviolence and work on that. Now I want to get into another area that you're so involved in, and that is, I want you to share, to help our viewers, particularly our younger viewers that will be listening, about when incidents arise. And we're going to go this way this time, Mike. We'll start with you, that you were last the other time. When racial jokes are told, or someone's dignity is attacked, and there are a lot of different incidents, and one might be present. Would you share with our viewers some recommendations, not to remain silent, not to stay on the sidelines, but give them some tools that would help them how to deal with different incidents that everybody sees?
Well, first thing I wanted to say was that I think that we're so new to this work at Gonzaga that having the Western students here has just been an amazing experience for us, just to see how that works. And so what I wanted to say, first of all, something that they always say, is that we're not in this work and stuff like that to make people feel like they're contributing if they don't say something. Okay. Certainly, if you need to feel like you're in a safe place before you're willing to come forward and say, that's not okay. But that being said, we also understand the implications, I think. We also understand the consequences of silence. I had mentioned it before about when everyone's sitting around, it feels like, particularly if you're the person, and I think that this issue of homosexuality is a really easy one, because this is something that's perfectly easy to hide. And you could be standing in a group of 15 people and no one would know, and they could tell a homophobic joke or a gay joke or whatever, and and if everyone is to laugh, or everyone is to laugh uncomfortably even, that's a difficult place for you to be in. So we certainly understand the consequences. I think that for me, my experience with this reaches far back enough to high school, and that knowing, I remember I was in high school, I went to high school in Western Washington, and a group of, I think they were just 2 college students. In fact, I think they paid their own way. They made a film about a Vietnamese student who was killed in Southern California, and they were from, I think they're from UCLA, maybe from USC Film School. They made a film about this, and it was a sort of unique case in today's world. It was a murder based purely on, I mean, they didn't even take this guy's money. They killed him because he was Asian. And anyway, they were touched by this, and they made a film about it, and they took it across the country. And I think they probably had some grants to it, but along with it. But I think it was essentially out of pocket, and they just spread the word. And that's something we like to tell people too. I think is educate yourself. But everyone who I saw at the showing of this film, it was the kind of experience that was like a very big moment that was kind of an awakening, you know. Everyone who walked away from it had a discussion with other people about how sad it was that nobody ever said anything when we were in that context, and that was the most disturbing part. Everyone is in the middle of this giant room watching this film, and everyone is willing to recognize that everyone else is feeling the same way, but when we're confronted with that situation, it's difficult. I deal with it personally usually with humor, but if it becomes a point where it's, I think, something so outrageous that I have to say something, I just personally have to do that. And it's easy to do it, I think, with some humor sometimes, to be like, well, that may be the case for you, but not with this, and that really depends, I guess, on a case-by-case basis.
So each case could be different, how you
Absolutely.
respond. Next, Victoria, how do you deal with it?
I think it's easier to deal with it in more personal, close groups, and I think why some people don't deal with it in close groups, because they think that doesn't matter, it doesn't make a difference, but I think that's where everyone needs to start. Like if you're sitting around with your friends and it's a safe place and you feel comfortable and someone makes a comment, you know, that's where it needs to start and then grow to bigger situations. Usually how I respond, and it's hard, I know the Western students talked about, it's hard not to just jump down their throat and be like, well, why are you saying that, you know? Because of the hammer
approach,
right.
may not work.
Right. But usually, and it's hard for me to be humorous about it, I'm usually very serious. Usually I ask, well, why do you think that's funny, you know? And then have them respond to me, like, and it puts the spotlight on them.
So by speaking up and asking questions, it makes them think that, you know, isn't it true that so many times in the culture with biases and prejudices that people just grow up in it and make comments, but they don't ever stop to think about the hurt or the consequences of the statement.
Yeah.
Now we switch over to Western Washington. Gonzaga has been very supportive of you and saying you've had a lot of experiences. And Jonathan, what recommendations do you have?
Well, first of all, our philosophy is one that you don't change people in their minds, you change them in their hearts.
Okay.
And so based on that philosophy, there's a number of different ways that you can go about trying to change people. And first of all, the first thing we have to say is this isn't an easy process, and it's not something that you can do just like that. It's not something that happens. It's got to be an ongoing process. So like Victoria was saying, a lot of times it works better if it's somebody that you have an ongoing relationship with, someone that's maybe in your circle of friends, or someone that you just are communicating with.
A family member?
A family member is a great example. But what we like people to do is, first of all, one of the things that's the hardest thing to do is we call it, I'm using the lingo here, but put your ouch aside. So if somebody says something to you and it hurts you so much that you can't respond to them in a positive way, then it's not the best time to interact with them. So walk away, take a breath, go do something else, and then come back to it later when it's a time when your ouch isn't so sore that you can't deal with that person with respect. Because we believe that everybody is good, basically, but they've had things throughout their lives that help them become racists or homophobes or whatever. So we think that by opening up a dialogue with that person, that hopefully you can get to the source of those problems. So asking a question, you know, like Victoria said, why do you feel that that's an okay joke?
Or what do you know what that means?
Do you know what that means? Or even, you know, I keep hearing people saying that is so gay, for example. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I've really been wondering why, and I've really been looking forward to the opportunity to ask someone why they use it like that. something as simple as that can make someone go, oh, I've never even thought about that.
Uh-huh.
And maybe they'll be able to talk to you, and maybe eventually you'll come to some common ground that that's not okay, and these are the reasons why, and you'll get that out through open dialogue.
And we'll go to you, Tiffany.
I think that the best thing to do is, like we've all said, just ask the questions and stay calm, and if it's not the right time for you, then that's okay to not say something if that just hurts too much and you can't get over your anger. And because I think if you go at someone with anger and just start yelling at them and telling them that they're wrong, they're just not going to get why they're wrong. They're not going to understand.
Might actually reinforce their determination to be.
Yeah, it might make them angrier.
One quick little footnote: I have a lot of wonderful conversations, and one of my very special students came into my office last year, and she's a beautiful person and celebrates people's differences. And she said, my mother's very prejudiced, so about once a month I sit her down and I talk to her about how wrong it is, and she always cries, but Mother is improving. Isn't that a beautiful story? I said, well, good for you. She said, I'm bringing Mother along. It's just taking some time. So that's why I mentioned family and all that. Yeah, that process that is so important. Time is flying by on the program, but I want to again start over here, and let's talk about victims. And when someone has been really, really violated, maybe emotionally, for example, and they really need an ally, they need a friend. Tiffany, let's start with you and the experience you're having at Western Washington. Give some advice to our viewers who may need to be an ally to someone. How do you comfort them? How do you tell them things that helps reestablish their dignity and self-esteem that's been so attacked?
I think one of the most important thing to do is acknowledge that something has happened to them. Don't minimize it at all, because obviously something has hurt them so much that it's important for them to know that you acknowledge that that happened to them. And make sure that it's just a safe place for them, that they know that they can be open with you and share their deepest feelings about what has happened to them. That's really important.
That is such wisdom, because so many times, even though one might think that depends on the situation, but one that you might consider it minor. If they don't consider it minor, that could be even very damaging if you don't give it the right attention. Jonathan, in relation to all of that, what are some of the comments, or I guess I'll put it this way. I had a friend once to tell me, a student here, that his friend called him and something had happened to him and he wanted to spend the evening with him, and this student said, I'm too busy, and his friend committed suicide that night. And so this student says, I have to live with this the rest of my life. So I guess part of my question, I've always remembered that, and that is that what are the signals? When do you need to take time out? That this is more important than something else?
That's a very difficult thing, and it actually moves into some of my other areas that I've worked in with sexual assault, and in the HIV testing realm, you have to deal with suicide risk and things like that. But I think when someone sits you down and says, I really need to talk to you about something, hopefully that's serious enough to make the time. And I would definitely suggest that you ask that person, if it's finals week and I've got 5 tests coming up and 2 papers to write, I may not feel like I have the time to deal with that person, but I think I would ask that person, is this something that can wait, or is this something that you need me to deal with right now? And make it clear to that person that if it is something that needs to be dealt with right now, that you'll make the time. Make it clear that you're not going to be inconvenienced by that, but it's something that you're willing to do. And I think just being open to the fact that you have people out there that want to come to you and give you these problems, I think that's a compliment.
Yes.
That you are an open enough person, and that you are a kind and caring enough person that they want to come and talk to you about these things.
It's a great honor, because you are the person in all of humanity they have chosen.
And secondly, with that, I would say, especially dealing with students, one thing that we really want you to do is to get support. If you're dealing with a disclosure, whether it be someone who's a victim of any kind of violence, sexual assault, racism, homophobia, anything that's very painful to them, if you're not a professional, then it's very important that you help that person receive the help that they need, because you can't give it to them if you're not a professional. And if you're a friend, that's not really your capacity. So it's definitely important to start the referral process going, help them get to the help that they need. Don't just say you need to go get help from someone else, but talk them through. Take them there. Take them to the counseling, like at our school we have a counseling center.
Sure.
Take them to the counseling center. But also, getting things like that from your friends can be really hard on you. So it's also, I think, important for your own mental health to make sure that you have someone to debrief with and talk to a professional about it and get that out of your system so you're not carrying that around with you, because it's difficult.
Victoria?
I think I think this question is simple. The most important thing you need to do is listen. And it's the easiest thing to do. And just sit there and listen to them explain their experiences and their feelings, and value their feelings and their thoughts, and just be a friend and an ally.
And Mike?
I think that actually both Tiffany and Jonathan said some really profound things about one of them, particularly at Gonzaga. You had mentioned something about how students it's important to recognize that this is how they feel, and whether you may or may not agree with that, this is their experience. Because I think it's a really dangerous game to play, to discount someone's experience and tell them that that's not really their experience. That can be a really dangerous thing, and it's something that's been under contention at Gonzaga for quite some time. I also wanted to say that my mother was a social worker and used to always tell me that, because I was that person in high school who was, even really, up until a few years ago, was the person who carried around all those things. And it's a really important thing to differentiate what it is to be a friend and what it is to be a counselor. And sometimes the boundaries cross, sometimes the lines will cross, but that's one of the biggest, most important things you can do for yourself and for them, because if it's so serious that they need professional help, you're not a professional.
You've got to get On that note, I wish we could continue. We're out of time, and you all four have been so special. Well, our future's good with people like you around. And again, good luck on your work. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, we bring this program to conclusion. Next week, we will continue this discussion on Confronting Hate with another guest. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.